Welcome to another episode of Teaching with Inquiry Live. This is episode number 59, and I'm so glad and thankful that you are able to join us. Tonight, we are talking flexible seating. Now, if you have tried flexible seating, or if you have thought about trying flexible seating, then tonight you're in for a treat. I'm going to be talking about how to do flexible seating in your classroom, how to dip your toe in if you've not started it already, and also how to start flexible seating while using a small budget. So flexible seating is not always about going to IKEA or Michael's or all of the furniture stores and buying yourself a whole whack of new furniture. Flexible seating for me is just a shift in the mindset, and it can be done without any extra cost. But you can also add a few things here and there every year as well, just to add some interest to your classroom. My name is Patty. I am a 4-5 split grade teacher in Ontario, Canada. I'm also the teacher, author, and blogger behind madlylearning.com. And I come live every single week discussing my journey in using inquiry-based instruction in my classroom and all of the other things that fit in with that. So how that looks in my classroom. And I cover a whole host of topics through this show. So I'm going to start with a story tonight. So this is a story about a student who I'm going to call Ava, obviously not her real name. But Ava was one of my best students in my classroom a few years ago. However, Ava never sat down when she was working. She was able to accomplish a tremendous amount of work, and she did a high quality level of work, but she never sat down. In fact, when I did get her to sit down, she wasn't as motivated and didn't put forth her best effort. Well, like I said, this was one of my best and brightest students in my classroom. So it didn't really seem to be a big deal for me to agree when she said, could I just stand at my desk? Now, this is the very first time for me that the light bulb clicked on, and I realized that for me as a teacher, I had to, if I wanted to be differentiating in my classroom, that one of the areas that I needed to differentiate, if I wanted to bring in choice and voice for my students, one of the areas that I could do that was being less rigid about where students were going to sit and how they were going to sit and what that looked like for them. So for Ava, she needed to stand. And by allowing her to do that, she was more engaged in what she was working on. The level and quality of her work went up. And I learned the valuable lesson that it wasn't as scary as I thought it would be to let go a little bit of that control and let students try something different. Because not every student is going to work exactly the same way by sitting at their desk and writing all looking the same. So that was my toe dip into flexible seating. It just took that one student. Now, when you see in a classroom, you've got one student, everybody else is sitting at the desk, and you have one student who's standing at her desk and working, it often makes those other students ask, well, could I do that? And I found myself more and more saying yes to those students' requests. Requests like, well, could I sit on the floor? Yes. Could I sit on the carpet while I work? Yes. Could I hide underneath your desk while I work? Yes. And that was a really strange one for me. But again, I had another student in my classroom that had just been diagnosed as on the autism spectrum. And she worked better when she didn't have anybody watching her. And she also worked better when she felt a close proximity to me, but she couldn't always sit with me and be away from other students. However, for her, sitting under my desk gave her a lot of comfort, and she was actually able to get quite a bit of work done. So there are students that need that different option and that different flexibility. And I just had to find the strength within myself to say yes to those student requests and realize that at the end, bad things didn't happen. Sure, there were some students that didn't necessarily focus when they needed to, but those were quickly remedied when I took that privilege of the flexible seating away. So Fast forward a few years now, and that I've been trying, what does flexible seating look like in my classroom? Well, earlier I posted on my Facebook page that I was going to be talking about this tonight, and somebody said, what do you do about the food? So now flexible seating for my classroom, because it's also the room that they all eat their lunch in, I still need to have a table spot or a home base for each student. So I do actually have tables in my classroom. So there's a picture of my classroom, and you'll notice that I still have those trapezoid tables, and I've put the two of them together to make a nice big hexagon. Those tables seat 6, and there's enough spaces for every student in my classroom to have their own space. Now that changes if I've got 36 students in my classroom. Yes, they all still fit with tables when I had 36, as well as when I had 18, and I still had just more space. So you can see this was obviously not when I had 36 students, because there's way more space between those tables than when I had 36 students and there was barely any room to move. But we still had flexible seating when my class was that large. So each student has a table and a home base. And for the most part, the only time I require them to sit there is during lunchtime. During independent work time, they do have the ability to earn the privilege to choose where they feel that they're going to work best. Now, that's the caveat. They must earn that privilege. It's not necessarily given to them. Because they have a home base, they can sit there, but I don't have to let them sit elsewhere if they cannot handle that level of responsibility. My number one rule is wherever you're sitting, work needs to be getting done, and you need to be showing that you can follow the classroom rules where you're sitting. Otherwise, I get to kibosh that and put you where I think you're going to work best. So with the flexibility and the choice comes added responsibility for the student to be able to do that. When I have students that are sitting, now where are they sitting? So there's a few different places where students are going to be sitting in my room. And for the most part, this started where I didn't have to spend any extra money to be able to allow students to use flexible seating. In fact, harnessing some of their creativity to design their own seating often helped to increase the level of flexible seating in my classroom without costing me too much output in the very least. So the number one area that students like to sit on is that carpet that you see in the center of my classroom. So students will lie on that carpet, they will sit on that carpet, they will sit with a partner, they'll do group work. A lot happens on that carpet. The carpet is also where I have whole group instruction. So all of the time I'm teaching the whole group lesson, my students are on that carpet with me. I don't often teach them when they're sitting at their table groups, primarily because allowing them to not have to sit there doesn't mean that I need to plan out my furniture placement on the ability for students to see, say, the smartboard, which is really the center of focus for our classroom. They don't need to see the smartboard through a whole group lesson from the various table positions because they're all on the carpet with me. So the carpet was the number one place for flexible seating for me in my classroom. The other area that I have in my classroom is the back counter, which you'll see just along the back. Now, I don't have standing tables. I don't need them. That counter in the back actually is standing height. So students will sit there. And I also have 2 computers there as well. So students can do some standing and working on those computers. And I don't need extra floor space to find a location for those computers. So I don't need to find an extra table. So I'm very fortunate that I do have this very large counter in the back, but allowing students to stand and work at that back counter was kind of an easy way to allow another area of flexible seating in my classroom. Now, another section of flexible seating that I have. Now, this is something that I have purchased, but these are some of the flexible chairs that I have in my classroom. But again, I didn't go out and pay full price. I scour the secondhand stores such as Value Village here or Goodwill, looking for alternative seating areas that I can get into my classroom that aren't going to be super gross. Preferably, they're going to be wipeable and they're not going to cost me a fortune. So I'm sure these Muskoka chairs were a heck of a lot more expensive originally, but I ended up getting these for $12. And what it appeared as though somebody bought them and tried to assemble them and pre-drilled some holes and did it all wrong. And then they shoved it back in the box and dropped it off at the secondhand store. So that was a huge score for me. And I had to kind of hunt through the furniture section at Value Village to find them because they were in a box, certainly didn't look like chairs. And I think they were underneath a few things. So if you spend a little bit of time and hunt and search, sometimes you can find some really awesome things there. So my friend Sarah helped me out and put these together for me 1 August for my classroom. And they're very sturdy and they stand up. We ended up assembling them with screws instead of the nails that they provided, just that they'd be a bit sturdier. And they have really added a different element to my classroom. Students love to sit on these. They are full-size chairs. They're not just children's-size chairs, so they are full-size chairs. And surprisingly, they actually still look in this condition. I have made it very clear to students, do not draw on Mrs. Firth's chairs. So they're still in a pretty good condition, and they were a nice, great, easy find. Another piece of flexible seating is, if you saw my Facebook page, you probably saw my Ottomans that I have. So those Ottomans I also bought at the secondhand store, and I ended up finding shower curtains as well and covered those with shower curtains. So you can see them here in the corner. There are these little blue and green Ottomans with the pillows. Now they sit in my reading corner. And again, they are mismatched Ottomans that I found, I think, for about $5 at the secondhand store. And I ended up spending the money to buy bed bug covers and covered them up and then put a slip cover over top that is removable. And I sewed them together. Don't look very closely. My sewing skills are not fantastic, but they're perfectly fine for a classroom. I may not put them in my house, but again, they're fine for my classroom. With the ability to sew a straight line and put some pins as I was attaching the fabric together, it actually came together with a little bit of time. It maybe took me 2 days to put those slip covers together, but I am able to take them off and wash them, as well as the pillows were also found. No, I think those are, no, I bought those pillows, but they were inexpensive and I didn't care what color they were. They were just clearance, I think from Walmart clearance pillows. And I just covered them up with the same fabric. And again, put the bed bug cover in between, just so you never know. Now, I am fortunate that my school doesn't typically have a huge lice or bed bug problem. If we did, those 2 pieces of furniture would be absolutely the very first thing to go. If you are at a school that often has students that have lice or have bed bugs, I would highly caution you against putting any soft fabric on chairs that students will be sitting on. As much as they say don't lie on it, it doesn't always happen. So those, again, are 2 Ottomans, and I'm still not spending, I think I am under all in, under $25, $30 in terms of having 2 pieces or 2 sections of my room that are flexible seating. And then of course there's the time on top of that, because I have the DIY time to kind of make them match. If you don't care about the matching, you don't even have to do that. Just throw them in mismatched. Really, students don't care. The last thing I did last August was buy a few chairs from IKEA. Now, IKEA has very inexpensive white plastic chairs for kids. It's actually their outdoor furniture, and they are great for a classroom because they're fully formed plastic. They stand up really well. They stack, so they're easily able to move out of the way, and they are lovely in the classroom, and students really enjoy sitting on them. So those are from IKEA, and I don't have a picture of those, but I do highly recommend spending the couple dollars that it costs to, I think they're like on sale. You can probably get them half off at some point in time in the summer for about under $10 each, which I think is a good deal. I also purchased a few lap desks at Michael's. They were on sale last week for $7. And then of course they went down to $5 each. So if you want to try lap desks, it's a great price to go in and get started on those too. That's pretty inexpensive. You're not going ahead and buying huge pieces of furniture. You're just putting a few pieces together every couple of months, and it ends up being pretty affordable as long as you don't go kind of overboard. Now, one of the other things that's really important is rules. How do children and students in my room decide where they're going to sit and what the rules are for that. So I talked earlier about how it's a privilege to get to sit in flexible seating because I do have a home base for them due to them eating lunch in my classroom. So using flexible seating is a privilege. Now, we have done it a couple of different ways. We talk about why we have flexible seating. We talk about what are the options, learning about yourself as a learner and what you need to be most successful. And then we've developed a list of areas that certain students think they would like to try and sit. And then those students cycle through who gets to sit where. And it sometimes seems a little bit complicated, but I just make a chart paper and put all of the different options for seating, and students choose 2 of their top choices for where they'd like to sit. And then we cycle through those names in a list, just go down the list and have people choose where they'd like to sit. And if one person decides today they don't want to sit there, that's okay. That goes to the next person in line, and now they get priority. And if other people can add themselves to the list, and we reevaluate that success. The other way we've done it is simply by table group. So I have the different areas or different pieces of flexible seating, so that Muskoka chairs at the Canada corner, the reading comfy chairs, the carpet, as well as the white chairs that I have from IKEA. Those 4 options, and I had 4 table groups last year, so that made a lot of sense to just cycle through and say 1, 2, 3, 4, and the next week I would rotate the table groups into different areas. And the students at that table group had priority seating. If no one from that table group was using those chairs, other people could come and use them, first come, first serve. And that seemed to work out well. But again, I also had a very small group of students at 18. So with 36 students, I needed to have a bit more flexibility and have less students rotating through each center. So that was definitely one. Now, with my students, if number 1 rule for flexible seating is to be on task and get your work done. So if that's not happening and students aren't able to meet their deadlines, then the first thing they lose is their flexible seating pass. So once they lose their flexible seating pass, they are back at their home base, or where I've asked them, some of them I move their home base for working as to my guided reading table so that I can supervise them a little bit more closely, because that's where I spend most of my day. But they lose their flexible seating pass. Now that often doesn't last very long, but they have to hand in a negotiated number of pieces of work in order to earn that flexible seating pass back. That means no sitting on those seats at any point in time during the day. They are off limits to those students, and I track who is lost their flexible seating pass at my desk. I don't post it anywhere publicly other than the students know where, like the clipboard that I have behind my desk will have who has lost their flexible seating pass. But I try not to make an announcement or have it posted so that you see the names posted of those students who have lost it. I have a record of it. They know who they are, but I try not to make it a big, huge show of who's lost it by, moving their name off of the flexible seating board or anything public like that. I don't want to draw attention if somebody has lost that privilege. So let me know if you're watching, if you have any questions about flexible seating in my room. If we have a burning question that I have not answered for you, please feel free to drop it in the comments. I do have access to seeing those as you write them in there. And I've been seeing a lot of people are saying hello. And Shanna, I see your question that you said, do I have a teacher desk? Let's see if I can find the picture. I do have a teacher desk. I'm not sure if you can see it in the picture there, but it is in the corner. So I'm generally taking the photo from my teacher desk. So if you look at the photo here of my classroom, and you see the chart cart there, that is the edge of that bulletin board there. And you'll see a little tiny hint there of my filing cabinet. My desk is over there in the corner at the front of the room, so that I'm standing at the classroom door at the front wall, and across the front wall, I have my blackboard and smartboard. And then I have my desk at the other corner opposite that. I actually hide my teacher desk. It's in behind a bookshelf, so you can't actually see what's on there. And I have a walk-through closet, a second door that accesses my classroom, which makes it really handy. But my desk is a disaster most days. And it's where I drop everything. It's where all of the mess is contained. And I just try to keep all of my mess contained into that corner over there, away from where students are. It's my process, I guess. My desk is a disaster. Probably not a huge surprise, but I mean, my classroom also never looks this clean. This is an August photo, so I like to look at it to remember what it's supposed to look like, but day to day, it doesn't always look like that. I do really enjoy flexible seating because I think students are more invested in their work. They get more engaged, especially in writing. That's where I notice it the most, is when students are comfortable, they get really invested in what they're writing in, and they just kind of go to town on their work. And they're comfortable, they write more, they are able to explore more things when they write. And it's not very difficult for me to manage, actually. Once they know the rules and the routine, and we slowly introduce those over the month of September and a little bit of October, so that it's not just show up day one and go, okay, everybody choose this comfortable seat, but you don't know how exactly I want you to sit there. We definitely go over the routines and structures of what it looks like, what I expect, that work needs to be done, that there's certain expectations of students when they are sitting in those areas, and that students that cannot handle it are also not able to do that. The other thing that I use that I didn't mention earlier for flexible seating, it's not really seating, but I also allow students to listen to music, as long as I can't hear it, because I really don't want to listen to what music they're listening to. Now, here's a few things that I've noticed. Some students love working in silence. That was me. Other students love working in noise. And those students that often love working with noise are the students that cannot be quiet when they're working. They're the students that you're constantly asking to stop talking with their partner or get on task and focus. One of the things I've noticed for those students is, my theory is, I think they talk because they don't like the silence. So they talk so they can add noise in the hopes that they can actually concentrate, which they can't because they're busy talking. Now, when I give those students a set of earphones and allow them to listen to music while they're working, it's now noisy in their head. And for the most part, the amount of times I need to talk to them and ask them to stop talking is greatly reduced. Now, for each student, that's going to be a little bit different. And it's one of the things that we talk about when creating learning profiles, so they get to know themselves as a student, is whether or not they need music to work or whether they need silence to work. But I do find allowing students to listen to music while they're working, as long as nobody around them can hear that music, does help with those students who distract others really easily, because they are already distracted by the noise that's in their head, as opposed to the noise that might be coming out of their mouth. So that is my extra bonus tip for you tonight about that. Jenna, you have students too that love listening to music. It's an easy fix, I find, to just let them listen to music. It doesn't bug me. It doesn't seem to bug others around them, but it makes a difference for them. So that was an easy one. That's an easy win for me. Elizabeth, I'm glad to see that this is totally out of your comfort zone, but that you're willing to give it a shot. I totally agree. You can't sit for a long period of time, so why should we expect our students to be able to do that as well? So I do expect them to sit for at least 20 minutes. That's about the longest work period that I typically get them to sit for. So I don't let them wander around the classroom, but I totally agree. I couldn't sit in a desk all day long. It's kind of why I became a teacher. I can't even sit in my office all day long over the summer. I'm constantly moving around my house, finding different comfortable places to sit while I work away on resources that I'm creating. Megan, I see your question, your students flipping through their phones looking for music. That is a bit of an issue when they get started. Now, I know you teach high school, so they do have all of their phones listening to music, so that does take a little bit of time. I have been able to use some of my old iPod touches. I mean, I've got a drawer full of like old iPods that I'm not using anymore because I have my iPhone, but I have the little iPod minis, and I've loaded up some, like, for my kids bop or some pop music that has clean lyrics. I've loaded those up from my iTunes, so they're available, so they don't even really have to scroll, they just have to play. And if you get some of the headphone splitters where multiple students can listen to one iPod Touch, then the best part is they're not surfing the internet. They just have music. So they might be scrolling through the music, but at least they're not getting distracted from all of the games and apps and stuff that might be on their phone. So that is an option if having them listen to music only happens on, say, an iPad or an iPhone. Maybe try one of those old pieces of technology. And I bet you can probably find that there's people that are willing to donate those because they're literally just sitting in their drawers somewhere. So you can probably use them in your classroom because they still play music. So why not? Yes, find a playlist and stick with it. Just turn on the radio. They can all find, a radio station that has that there. So those are my tips and tricks for flexible seating. Really, when it comes down to it, flexible seating is more about you shifting your mindset as a teacher and allowing the flexibility of students to choose where they're going to sit, as opposed to needing to go out and buy a whole ton of new furniture to make your room flexible seating Pinterest ready. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Students can come up with creative ideas of where they can sit in your classroom and how they can turn the things that are already there into flexible seating options for themselves. You'd be amazed at some of the ideas they can come up with the limited resources that you might have in your room. With a few things where you can hunt and find to, Value Village and secondhand stores, you really can find alternatives for some of the cool, cutesy furniture that you might see over on Pinterest. You can find alternatives that are much more cost effective. And I would add slowly to those over time as you yourself are getting more and more used to using flexible seating in your classroom. Do what works for you and what your comfort level is. I am not comfortable with having them come in and having unassigned seats at this point. Maybe one day, but I'm not there yet. I need to have them home base, and then they move out to the flexible seating from there. I hope that helped you understand how to dip your toe in a cost-effective way into flexible seating. And thank you very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate all of the comments and reactions to the video, and thank you for the support on social media as well. If you want to read about flexible seating and see some more pictures of what that looks like in my classroom, you can check out the blog post that goes along with this at episode 59 of Teaching with Inquiry Live, and you can find that on www.madlylearning.com. I just have to sign off and add those pictures to it and post it on up there for you. And if you want to listen to this show on the go, you can check out the podcast replay or else YouTube show that is hosted on the show page at www.teachingwithinquiry.com. And you can get tonight's episode number 59, as well as almost all of the other episodes that I have done up until this point, all about using inquiry in your classroom. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Monday at 9 o'clock as we start talking more about getting back to school ready. Thanks very much. Talk to you later. Bye.